we're getting a bit off track. So despotism is justifiable in dealing with barbarians if you're trying to improve the barbarians' lot. Liberty, as a principle, has no application to any state of things anterior to the time when mankind have become capable of being improved by free and equal discussion. So that is maybe a pretty good case for it then. He says, liberty is only something we can discuss, quote, when mankind have become capable of being improved by free and equal discussion. Now, if you can't talk among yourselves and reason with each other and persuade each other, if that's not within your cultural ability, then liberty is not within your cultural ability. You have to be able to improve by free and equal discussion. Now, I'll be doing some little tidbits out of this book in another series called Bloody Falls of the Coppermine by McKay Jenkins. It's about the Eskimos in northern Canada, and they're running with the Canadian law. And the adolescent nature of the way they think and their complete non-hierarchical society. There wasn't king and government and stuff because there was no need for irrigation. If you take that ancient hypothesis that irrigation was what led to the first governments, there's virtually no government. There's just taboos and stuff, and they make the weirdest reasoning, those Eskimos, or they lack reasoning. When one of the Eskimos was asked, what are you thinking about when you're not hunting and stuff and you're just, you're in your igloo and you've got food and stuff, what do you think about? What do you contemplate or use your mind for, is the idea that the Westerners were trying to get to. And the Eskimo said, I don't have to think, I have enough meat. So they are childish and adolescent, and if one of them steals something from another, they just regard that as like a little scandal, but there's not much you can do about it except everybody talks about it and doesn't like that person and they're not trusted and stuff, but there's no retribution or anything. Well, they have not reached the point where they can improve themselves by free discussion amongst themselves, come to conclusions, and decide on action. So they would have to be dealt with despotically, perhaps. That's an example. That might be what he's talking about. If you're going to justify despotism, I don't know if there's a better justification than that right there. But since the Germans and the Japanese certainly did not have this habit of free and equal discussion, yet we set them free after World War II, and they've done fairly well. They've maintained a free and individualist society ever since World War II. So I might take exception to his whole way of thinking about this. So until they can improve themselves by free and equal discussion, there is nothing for them but implicit obedience to an Akbar or Charlemagne, if they are so fortunate to find one. But as soon as mankind have attained the capacity of being guided to their own improvement by conviction or persuasion, compulsion is no longer admissible as a means to their own good and justifiable only for the security of others. So, before that, compulsion is acceptable, he says. So there's possibly a debate to be had. Now, I think acts of war are one thing. So if you're saying war against barbarians, yeah, despotism and compulsion is fine. But within governance, I think that people should only be told what they cannot do and then let to do what they please. Now, he says he foregoes any advantage which could be derived to his argument from the idea of an abstract right as a thing independent of utility. So he thinks rights require utility. He's not going to try to divorce it. In his mind, if a right doesn't lead to something useful to man as a progressive being, then it's not tied to reality. It's abstract, floating, ideal, useless. So he says he's not into that. All of the rights he's talking about on ultimate appeal to ethical questions comes down to a question of utility or usefulness, something man can get some tangible benefit from. But it must be utility in the largest sense, grounded on the permanent interests of a man as a progressive being. So what does he mean by progressive being? I don't know. Interpret it how you like, though. He thinks that's ultimately what the question of utility comes down to. Now he says rather oddly that a person may cause evil to others not only by his actions but by his inaction, and in either case he is justly accountable to them for the injury. So he can cause injury to someone by not doing something. Now, maybe that's the Good Samaritan type idea, that if you walk by and there's someone drowning, you have to do whatever you can to help. But I don't know. It seems like, how would you delimit such a category? It seems like that category would always be growing. And, oh, since you didn't give this guy a job, now his family's starving, and I don't know. If you say inaction on your part can lead you to guilt, I just don't know how to delimit that. And he says that this requires a very cautious exercise of compulsion, but he thinks it could be done, that we could figure this out. To make anyone answerable for doing evil to others is the rule. To make him answerable for not preventing evil is, comparatively speaking, the exception, yet there are many cases clear enough and grave enough to justify that exception. Now, I wonder which cases. He says there are a bunch of cases. And then I continue to read the material, and he doesn't give any cases. So he goes on and finishes that paragraph without mentioning a single case, not a single such case. Now he says that the liberty of expressing and publishing opinions may seem to fall under a different principle than general liberty, since it belongs to that part of the conduct of an individual which concerns other people. So when you print stuff, it's not like sitting at home eating too many cakes. When you print stuff, you're in some way affecting other people. But being almost of as much importance as the liberty of thought itself, and resting in great part on the same reasons, the liberty of expressing and publishing opinions is practically inseparable from liberty itself, from the regular liberty. Now, the one thing that I have against John Stuart, other than he's wrong on a few things, the one thing that I have generally against his whole book is that he just states things like that. Brilliantly put, but he just states them. And we're only on page 15, but I have outlined the material clear up to page 112 out of 145 pages. And it's the same all the way through. Brilliant statements, but statements. They're not he doesn't induce, he doesn't show you the historical build-up or anything. A little bit once in a while, like a historical idea of liberty and stuff, but too often he just states things. So there he says that you have to be able to think freely and publish freely. That falls underneath what we call liberty. Now he says something a little bit alarming. Though this doctrine is anything but new, and to some persons it may have the air of a truism, right? We all know this. Everybody knows this stuff. Still, there is no doctrine which stands more directly opposed to the general tendency of existing opinion and practice. So he says this is against the signs of the times, it's against public opinion, it's against the intellectuals. This idea that the individual should be free to do what he wants